So we're here today, family members, friends, friends and family members of Teresa Vince on the 20th anniversary of her death. So I just would like everybody to introduce yourselves to begin with. Here, we start here.
What you want?
Introduce yourself.
I'm Jim Vince. I was Teresa's husband. The other way?
I'm Catherine Kedziora. I'm Teresa Vince's eldest daughter.
I'm Pat Hoy, former politician.
Joy Lang, former director of the Chatham-Kent Women's Centre.
I'm Michelle Schreier, Executive Director of the Chatham-Kent Sexual Assault Crisis Centre.
I'm Jackie Carr. I'm Teresa Vince's daughter.
I'm Sharon Scrimshaw, Friends of the Vince family.
Thank you. So I'm just going to put out some things that we can talk about. And I'm going to ask the family first to comment, and then others to come into the conversation where you have something to offer. So, Jackie, I can start with asking you to talk about moments of grace and mercy.
So, Barb, you had asked if we would kind of recount, the family could recount some of the things that stood out during the time when Mom died. And we did that. It was kind of a bit of a collective effort. And when I was putting the things together, it really did seem to me that one of the more important messages were around grace and mercy. And when I think about that, one of my most vivid memories, and I've shared this with Joy, was Joy coming up the back stairs of our house, and she talked about that earlier today, and that was on June 11th. And the family was devastated at that time. And I just I'm so struck by the courage and the compassion and the love that she brought into the house at a time when we really needed that. And that, to me, was one of the watershed moments that we knew that we were supported, and that there were people that were going to help us make sense of what happened.
It was a watershed moment for me, very memorable. And I was thinking about it on the way down. And I happened to pick up one of my old schedules. We moved, and I was looking. I found a Women's Center newsletter with some of the details of what happened that year. And then I found my day book, and I went and saw 189 West Street, June 11th, 6:30. And I can remember being invited there by a relative. They just called me out of the blue and said, we knew the tragedy had happened. And I just thought I was going there to provide grief information and where they might find it. And there was this beautiful table with beautiful pictures of the family and Teresa. And that's really almost all I can remember, and them talking wonderful, telling me the story of her life. And obviously then they were looking for help about sexual harassment, which I was, not knowledgeable about really. And so I can remember going away, and I said, well, I'll do what I can. And my first thought then was to get a hold of Michelle, who knew about sexual harassment. Our center was housing abused women. So that was a very memorable time. And, I remember all the kids, the grandchildren, and they were all sitting there. And they were looking for something from me maybe I couldn't give, but thank you for that.
Grace and mercy. I think I'm going to go a little offbeat about this one, because when I think of Grace and Mercy, the first thing that popped in my mind was the first time I met or came face to face with Russell Davis's wife and daughter. And even though we had such a profound pain and tragedy, I looked in their faces and I just could not imagine the kind of pain and disillusionment that they themselves were trying to sort through. And it came to me just quite suddenly how very fortunate we were, because we had this support system, this extensive support system. Joy and Michelle and Barb and Sharon and Jerry and Leslie and Pat, and just this extensive support system. And that's what I think got us through. They were, as I've said before, they were our strength when we didn't have any. They guided us when we were a little lost. They stood in front of us when there was ridicule and criticism, beside us when we needed to be held up, and behind us when we needed to stand forward on our own 2 feet. And that is Grace and Mercy, in my opinion.
I really like that you said that, Kathy, because one of my other memories, it's one of the first ones that I had, was coming to the house for the first time, and Dad put his hands around my face, and he was referencing Russell Davis, and he said he never knew love. And that was, for me, such an incredible gift of compassion, because it set the tone for our family. We didn't need to hate. We were given the gift of being able to have a position of understanding and compassion and non-judgment, for him. And I think that's what freed me up to be able to do positive things and to heal and be well. And that was an incredible gift of mercy, Dad, that you gave, I think, to our whole family. I think other things that sort of fit in that theme of grace and mercy for me also was lots of things related to the support that we got in London from Barb and Sharon. But one of the ones that I remember is when we started doing the vigils, the Purple Ribbon campaign, and we had the vigils outside of the Sears stores. And so many people that came that we had never met or didn't know who they were, and knowing that other people cared about this issue. And one woman who brought this gigantic flag, and she's waving the flag, and Barb asked me, "Is it okay if we have flags?" And I was kind of thought, I'm not sure about it. And so, Barb and Michelle and Joy and Sharon took just such intimate care, and really listened to what we needed, and that made us whole. And so, things down to funny things like flags and making sure, that, the message that was being sent was one that the family felt comfortable with. But that caring made such a difference.
Jackie bringing up the Purple Ribbon campaign and the vigils held outside of Sears just reminded me, and I think this fits with Grace and Mercy, and I can remember one of the vigils that we held, and it was outside of the window of the office where my mother was shot to death. And it was a peaceful vigil. There was lots of people, and we were releasing purple balloons, I believe. That was the 5th the 5th anniversary, and the people inside Sears were ordered not to come out. And partway through the vigil, they came and shut the blinds to the window. Do you remember that, Michelle? And it was so sad. I felt so sad for them that they were not able to grieve in the way that they probably needed to. And they shut it out.
So you met some feminists. The family met some feminists. Jim, what did you think of the feminists?
It wasn't long learning to love them. Back in those days, it was so dark, you know. We all looked for at each other for support, the family. And it wasn't uncommon to see one of them sitting in the corner crying. And I'll never forget the day Joy came. I can still see her coming up that steps and into the house. And she finally says, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to do all I can. And she was so sincere about it, like glad you hung around. And then Michelle got into this mix. And that's, I guess, that's the way to think about it, the movement, the mix. And there just kept more and more, more and more. And then the inquest came, and that really gelled a lot of people. And I can't remember her name, and if somebody can bring it up for me, as the reporter from the London Free Press. We should never forget what she did for us in the newspaper reports. She brought the truth out. I'll never forget her. Yeah. And just that's, you know, her, because we sometimes don't remember her. And the rest of us are also used to each other, you know, you just kind of take everybody for a barbecue, come along, and everybody. And the hope was always there that something was going to get done. And I wasn't long learning. All I had to do was get back out of the way and let yous go at it. It didn't need me to be. Jerry Sanson. So many people to thank. These are the people that stood out. I always think about Jerry Sanson and the morning that Judge, what was her name?
Benita. Dr. Benita Porter.
Benita Porter. She pulled that one on her so slick. That was just beautiful that morning.
Maybe you don't want that.
When she was questioning the lady from Sears, remember? But there was so much going on back in them days. And she'd always call in for a break, like always going to the bathroom. Jerry was good at that. I can remember that. When she wanted, Jerry wanted something, she wanted to think something over. Hey, yeah, I would go with the hand. We got to have a break. And then the inquest was over. And then we had Pat step in there and start working. And been so many people over the last 20 years, just countless and countless. They've come and they've went. All for a beautiful woman. You couldn't say nothing wrong about her, because she was the little mother hen at work too. I know, I seen it all the time. And she was a mother, a daughter, a friend, and you couldn't get a better one for anything. She was always there. She was always helping the women at work, you know. The kids know that, you know. So, and here we are 20 years later.
You know, I think of Grace and Mercy. We would not have been able to be at that table had it not been for Jerry's willingness to significantly subsidize. She did so much work for so little money, and Sears was there with their huge legal team, and it seemed as though everyone was represented at the inquest with these big legal teams. And we had Jerry, and Jerry had Joy and me. And so we learned a lot in that process because we became Jerry's team. Jerry was skilled and talented and strategic and brilliant in the way she was able to get information out there, information that I'm sure otherwise would have stayed buried. And Joy and I would spend our time taking notes and doing the best we could to be a support and to be her resource, the rest of her legal team. And so I want to acknowledge the work that she did in that way. And the other thing that I have to say, even it may not be about Grace and Mercy, but since this conversation started, I have not been able to get this vision out of my mind, so I need to share it. And for me, one of the really the huge motivations and just reminding me of how important this work is I keep having these visions of Nicole, this beautiful, beautiful little girl in her pink tutu, and Eric, who would race with Joy up and down the snow drifts at Sears when we were holding our purple ribbon campaigns. And then I got to meet Aileen. And every time I met another child connected to the Vinces, it fed my soul. I knew that it was important what we were doing, and we had to keep doing it. So thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Aileen. And if Eric were here, I'd thank him too.
There's so much that could be said, but to me, like, we wouldn't be where we are today with the legislation change, with the research, with conferences, with videos, with education packages for workplaces, without feminists, without Michelle and Joy and Barb and Sharon and Jerry and Sandy, and the list can go on. Like, these are the women who understood from the very beginning that what had happened to Mom had happened to other women before her, and were going to happen to more women afterwards. And it wasn't just about Mom, but it was about women everywhere, and something needed to be done about it. And they had the brilliance and the intelligence and the love to do the work. And we felt so loved throughout the process. That was political and personal, and you made us laugh. Michelle with her songs. After like hard days during the inquest, and Michelle would break out in like a funny little ditty that originally they were all original verses. And finding companions, and learning so much, and how to be a better person from these women who have become our friends.
The feminists were learning. Like, we didn't have all the answers back then. And I do remember Eric and I running up and down those snowbanks. I diverge, but I also need to bring up, Sears donated $2,500 to the Women's Center right after the funeral. And in conjunction, we talked to, of course, the family and, of course, the board of directors. And we decided to send it back, the money, and challenge Sears to take that money and have programs within their corporation to educate women on sexual harassment. And to this day, I don't think they ever did that. And maybe that's why their stores aren't doing so well. That's my thinking. It's karma. But also, I think that it was very difficult. Jackie alluded to it. I was told when we sent the money back that we wouldn't get any more donations, right? Because the center, needed the donations too. So that was a big decision. And do you know that the next day after that hit the paper, we had somebody give us $2,000. So it wasn't the $2,500 that we turned back, but so I had faith that that was the right. Well, I always had faith that was the right decision, but then that the center wouldn't suffer because of that. And just one other thing, that people in the community would say, "Joy, you're too hard on Sears. Get off their back." That was just, well, don't you know they're the main store downtown? So, it was a very controversial, we were always having the vigils and giving the money back. It was some difficult times.
Part of this, and we've alluded to it a little bit, was the inquest. And it wasn't an easy process to even get the inquest. I wonder if one of you want to talk a little bit about that.
I was under the wrong impression that if a worker was killed in an Ontario workplace, there would automatically be an inquest called. But that was not the case. The case was that if a worker was killed because of faulty machinery or some such thing, then there would be an inquest. But if a worker was murdered at her workplace, even if the murderer was her supervisor, there would not be an automatic inquest. And after speaking with the family, and Joy and I had already talked, the Sexual Assault Crisis Center invited the Women's Center and the Labor Council to join us in forming a coalition that would work in partnership with the family, and we would lobby for an inquest. So in September, I don't remember the date, but in September of 1996, we held our first media conference. And at that media conference, we launched the petition for an inquest into Teresa's murder, along with some other things. We wanted a provincial committee that would be funded by government, maybe something like the round table, only a little broader, but I mean, now there is a round table. At any rate, we did successfully get the inquest, and the coalition successfully applied for standing, and we worked in partnership with the family. It was a very strong and important bond and partnership.
So the inquest, getting the inquest was a victory, but all barriers didn't just disappear. So there's a couple things that I think really we need to talk about. Two inquests, but beyond that, the defense that Sears put forward, the persistent pursuer theory, and then the intimidation of their employees. Does somebody want to talk about what happened there?
I think one of the most frustrating and hurtful and profoundly sad things that I think we watched happen was the manipulation and the bullying of Sears Council over Sears employees. We had who had been corralled to the store. They shut the store down. They corralled all of the employees with their counsel in order to change all of their original statements given to the police in order to submit these statements to the inquest, to the courts. Statements such as, oh yes, he was harassing her, yes, he had a thing for her, or everybody knew that he was in love with her, that sort of thing, changed epically from statements like that to, well, yeah, he had a crush on her like a father. Or, and I'm struggling. I just know that there were people who sat down at my mother's table for holidays that basically threw her under the bus when push came to shove. Somebody who grew up and played with us in our yard as children was I can't talk about that now.
We received a letter that had been leaked by an employee that let us know that Sears lawyers were representing not only the upper management for Sears and the store management, but as Catherine said, all of the employees. I don't recall the letter, but the point being one legal firm representing all of these parties. And so I think it was the coalition that raised this as a conflict of interest. And we felt strongly that the employees needed to have their own representation, that there was no way that the legal firm for Sears could possibly represent frontline workers. And so we raised that at the inquest. Sears did not agree with the coroner's decision when the coroner decided that indeed Sears lawyers could not represent the frontline workers. And so at that time, Sears called for a judicial review. They wanted, they wanted their lawyer to be able to represent frontline workers. And at that time, I think they also wanted a new coroner. They weren't liking the direction the coroner was going in. And so we had a judicial review in Toronto. And again, Jerry Sanson was brilliant and strategic and talented and skilled in the way she represented all of us. Jerry was there for both the family and the coalition. And as I said, Sears lost that judicial review. We won, and Sears had to pay the family and the coalition, not what the review cost, but certainly it was a vindication. Then we went back to the table to resume the inquest. Judge, I believe his name was George Adams, was it? Do you remember? Judge Adams. He actually ordered that we get back to the table as quickly as possible to finish the inquest. And when we all met, thinking that we were going to resume the inquest was systematically shut down. And we had to start all over again with applications for standing. And when we came back, Sears had a new legal firm, and we had a new coroner. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment further on that aspect. It wasn't easy, but we did it, and at the end, everyone knew what Teresa's experience had been, and we knew that sexual harassment is a dangerous circumstance, a hazard in the workplace, and that the harasser is the danger.
I know that was accomplished out of the inquest, learning about the danger of sexual harassment, but what was the theory that Sears put forward to try to explain the behavior, Russell Dade?
Right out of the gate, Sears came to the inquest suggesting that Teresa had not ever been sexually harassed. It was their assertion that she had been persistently pursued by her boss. And we, not affectionately, referred to it as the PP theory.
They really blamed Teresa because they said she knew about all the rules. She should have known how to report it and gave all kinds of, really, actually right from the get-go in the first interviews in the paper, it was that there was no sexual harassment because she knew fully well the policies of Sears. So
Yes, people did say because of Teresa's position that she knew the policies and she should have known what to do, et cetera, to which we say, that's probably why when Teresa reported the sexual harassment, knowing the policy as she did, she fully expected that Sears would launch an investigation into her complaint, and Sears never did that.
Right from the get-go, it was an adversarial tone with Sears. And to me, it baffled me because they could have taken the reins and been forerunners with this issue, hand in hand with the family and the Sexual Assault Center and the Women's Center. Like, this could have been an issue that they could have taken and run with and been pioneers. But instead, they stood in an adversarial way, and I never understood that. It's that blaming the victim mentality, and it was right out of the gate, Joy. I think that interview that you're talking about with their PR person happened like Penny Kitson happened 2 or 3 days after the murder. She stood there in front of the media and blamed my mother for her own death.
So after the inquest, there was a recommendation to review the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The review happened in a very perfunctory way, and it was decided no changes were made. But Pat, you put forth a private member's bill. Do you want to talk about what you were thinking when you put forth that bill?
Well, first of all, I was approached about the bill by the Vince family and probably by yourself as well. And my recollection was, first of all, we should do this, of course. And then the other part of it was, I remember the conversation being, it would really be good if a male did this. I remember the thought was that this would be good for you to do on our behalf. There was a little bit of education for myself that there was pushback within the city from a lot of quarters. I remember that conversation, and that we needed to work together to do this. And of course we did. I've helped 3 different families with tragedies and had some legislation brought forth to deal with it. And most of the families simply, notwithstanding they want the truth to be known and those issues, the underlying issue with them is that they want this to never happen again. So that's how we approached it, as legalities notwithstanding. But this awareness week in relationship to sexual harassment was to help make sure that this never happened again to anybody else. And that was very touching for me. The group also knew, and that being friends, advocates, and the family knew that my first bill wasn't going to pass. I already had a bill, and you can only pass 1. You can introduce 10, but you can only speak to 1. So I had a commitment to another family. And once that bill passed, we marched forward with the bill that we have now and the awareness week that we have now. But I have never met a family like the Vince family in my life. They want the truth to be known. They don't take no for an answer. They're not going to be dissuaded in any way. And I think they should feel very good inside that women and men are now protected in a better way than they were 20 years ago. It's unfortunate that it took 20 years. I heard all manner of reasons why we should not do this, but with their conviction, I knew that we had to.
And also your occupational health and safety legislation, private members bill.
Well, that
like
was...
sexual harassment piece, but
Yes. Well, the other part became more of a government initiative, the other aspects of it. Mine was, I think what I did with the Sexual Harassment Awareness Week set the stage for the next steps. It was a very small step, Sexual Harassment Awareness Week, in the big picture, but with governments, years sometimes are not considered. The time is not necessarily always of the essence. So it's a step towards those other pieces that took decades.
Sharon, I'm looking at you, and I know that you went through your own experience, but when Jackie got in contact with us, you really stepped into action. You were a huge support. And I just wonder, what were you thinking? What was happening for you as you were supporting the Vince family?
It took a long time when, after I left my workplace, it took a long time before I really received any assistance. Not to blame anybody else, it was, I didn't know where to go or what to do. So I realized that when this happened to the Vince family, that they needed somebody to step in right away to help them, you know, like not necessarily to do things for them, but just to be there for support, because that's the biggest thing, is the support. And that's what women don't have, because there isn't any organizations around. So they just need people around them to say, you know, you'll get through this, and things will be, you know, not okay, but, you know, you will strive forward. And, you know, things will take time to change. Of course, it's been 20 years. But I think that was the main reason.
When I think about, you know, your role, Sharon, and how you supported the family, and tying it to Barb's question about, you know, what's it like to meet a feminist? There's so much work that has been done, and not one person in this room really has an idea of, you know, the whole picture of who did what. But what I know is, you know, when the work was being done around the inquest and research and trying to make a case to support the legislation, you are one of a small handful of people that have behind the scenes quietly supported and met with women and offered that support. You did it with me, with my family, and hundreds of women in this province, and you filled a gap that you recognized that still exists today. And you have been such an influence on what we understand on how to support women in when they're experiencing this in the workplace. And I know that this is true. I know that it's influenced the views that have been taken in approaching legislation and approaching the research. And I just, you telling your story, I think connected London to Chatham and allowed us to continue that narrative and that dialogue, and gave strength to that storyline of we have to change our workplaces and the support that we offer to women when they're experiencing violence in the workplace.
And Jackie, I'm going to ask you just to say a few words about how the family felt and how you connected to the DuPont family when you learned about Laurie's death. Kathy?
How we felt when we learned about Laurie's death. Devastated. It was never supposed to happen again, and it did. And I've spoken quite openly about carrying some guilt over that because things didn't progress as quickly as they should have in order to prevent Laurie's death. How we connected with the DuPont family was through Michelle. Michelle had attended the inquests, and I believe you attended the family, did you not, Michelle?
I was at the Laurie DuPont inquest, but we did
Yeah.
not
But way before that, yeah. But it was you that connected us, because we met at the sexual assault center. And we wanted, because we understood better than anybody the kind of pain and where they were coming from. And I personally wanted to reach out, and I believe that was what we all felt, is we wanted to reach out and give them some support from people who understand, who've walked their shoes, who knew. And I remember Barb looking at me and asking me, how do you live with it? Or how do you get over it, is what she said. How do you get past it? And I just told her blankly, you don't. You don't get past it. What you do is you incorporate it. It becomes a part of you. You live with it, and you go forward each day, taking it with you and creating a new life that incorporates that loss, that pain, the tragedy, and hopefully something good comes out of that.
Thank you. So we've got a very little time left, but does anybody want to add anything? Does anybody have any last words?
I have something I do want to say, and I want to say it to Pat Hoy. I want to thank you for restoring my faith in politics. Because before you, we had a politician who basically told us that everybody's a victim and that we just needed to get over it. And I had a politician who told me, you're never going to make change, but I have a CD that we're going to give to all the schools. There were a lot of people who came into play to help support bringing change. But you were the first politician, you in your quiet, soulful way, Pat, restored my faith in politics and humankind.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Thanks.
Here we go.